Hey guys, welcome to the rise and fall of WCW documentary review. I'm gonna rate it out of 10. So I'm gonna also put it in the description of on my channel, and you can watch it. It's around an hour and 45 minutes in an interesting documentary. So it's about the rise and fall of the WCW promotion. So it at first was run by Jim Crockett Promotions. It then they ran it, and it was very successful. It got a good TV deal, and then they had a good roster like the Four Horsemen, Sting, and Magnum TA. So it was just mainly at first going through the first bits, what happened at the start of WCW, and then unfortunately around 1988 Jim Crockett Promotions sold WCW to Ted Turner. I say unfortunately because I believe if Jim Crockett Promotions stuck with WCW and they was on a good TV deal and they got good payments year to year, I think WCW still might be here. But Ted Turner gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. He took it. He shouldn't have really. I think he should have just kept WCW. But Ted Turner and AOL bought WCW in, I think, late 88. And it talked about when they took it over. And but before that, so they had a star called Magnum TA. He was a up and coming rising star. And then he was in a car crash, and unfortunately, he became physically disabled after that and couldn't wrestle again. I still think he's in a wheelchair because of that accident. So shame. And then in '88, they bought it, and then they then it was talking about Ric Flair, Sting, how Ric Flair had the title. Then in '91 he left. Then they had to create new stars like Vader, Sting, Lex Luger, and other people. Then Flair came back. And then around the early 90s, Eric Bischoff took over. And the first thing he did was cut the house shows just to save money. And and then he bought in '94 Randy Savage. Was it '93? Yeah, I think it was '93. Late '93. He brought Randy Savage in. And then he bought Hulk Hogan in '94. So he brought two massive stars from WWF. So that'd be like AEW, who's in case people don't know what AEW is. AEW is like another promotion who's owned by Tony Khan. His dad funded him, gave him a lot of money and funded AEW, and they paid all the wrestlers contracts, very expensive contracts, and it's just another promotion for wrestlers to go and wrestle, and another alternative promotion for fans to watch. So it's great to have an alternative to the main, to WWE, because, yeah, as we found out in 2001, when there was nowhere else to go, some of the wrestlers didn't get paid good, and they were just lost in the shuffle in WWE. Then fans didn't have a alternative to watch. It wasn't great. You had TNA, Ring of Honor, but they were like smaller promotions. They weren't competing with WWE. Whereas, I'll get back to the documentary in a minute. But AW they're competing for contracts. They're paying them as much, if not more, than what WWE do. Whereas before, apart from the odd person like Kurt Angle or AJ Styles, because they chose to stick with TNA or go to New Japan, well, AJ did for a couple of years. They what was I saying? That was it. My mind's gone blank now. Oh, that's so frustrating when that happens. Yeah, why they didn't go is because they stuck with the promotions they was with, but they weren't making as much as what WWE would give them. Whereas in AW now, they pay people, women wrestlers and men wrestlers, as much as WWE, if not more. And it's another alternative promotion to make good money and for the fans to watch. So it's great, and that's why it was sad when WCW went, because some of the wrestlers had nowhere to wrestle and to make good money, and yeah, fans who weren't like into WWE, or if it weren't for them, they had no other big promotion to watch on TV. Yeah, you had small little alternatives, like I said, Ring of Honor, TNA, but you'd really have to go out your way to look for it, you know? It weren't on like a TV channel for you to watch on. It was just a very small promotion. Yeah, they just weren't competing with WWE. Whereas AW is now, and they've got a decent TV deal, and they'll be around for a long time, I think. I don't think they go out of business. The only way they would is if Tony Khan's dad pulled the plug and didn't want to keep funding it. But they've got a decent TV deal now. They're starting to make some profit, a bit of profit. So I think he's happy with what's going on, and apparently the TV company they're with, TBS, are happy. So as long as all them things are good, AW is going to be around for a long time. So yeah, maybe one day could become as big as WWE. Maybe, but I'm just glad there's an alternative now, because for nearly 20 years there wasn't. Yeah, it dried up the industry, the wrestling industry. It definitely did. But anyway, back to the documentary. So that's it. We're on Hogan and Savage. So Randy Savage and Hogan sign. Then Hogan has a match with Flair, and so they're starting to sign bigger stars. Then they have Nitro, and they get Lex Luger, as his contract ended the same day as Nitro began. So he literally finished Raw, did a Raw taping, then he met Bischoff, signed with WCW, and showed up on Nitro as a special guest, as a new signing. And everyone was shocked. and Nitro is like their weekly TV show. So, yeah, they got Nitro now. They've got a TV show each week, and then in '96, not January '96, around May, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash have contract negations issues with WWE. They just couldn't come across a deal to stay. Then WWE was really struggling at that time. They couldn't afford to pay big contracts at that time. That's one of the reasons why Bret Hart ended up leaving. Yeah, between like 93 to 97, they was really struggling financially to afford some of them contracts. So Nash and Hall leave, and they go to WCW, and at the start they're called the Outsiders. Then they're facing WCW, and the story is they're coming from WF to invade. And then the storyline is they've got a third guy, and no one knows who it is. Apparently, Eric Bischoff said on his podcast that originally it was going to be Sting, but then he talked Hogan into turning heel. They both agreed, and then Sting was dropped as the third guy, and Hogan became the third guy. So Hogan came out at Bash at the Beach '96. It's one of the best moments in wrestling history. He came out, everyone thought he was going to save the WCW wrestlers against the Outsiders, and then he hit the leg drop on Randy Savage. And the fans went mental. They were throwing bottles at him, they were throwing batteries. And it's one of the greatest moments in wrestling history. It was a phenomenal moment. There's so much hatred in that building when that happened. So yeah, they talk about the NWO forming, but the issue with the NWO was, most people on the roster ended up joining it, so you didn't really have enough wrestlers on the face group. So face is the good guy, heel's the bad guy, in case people don't know. There wasn't enough on the face group to try and overcome the NWO. Not just that, the way WCW worked, they had their top guys, mid-carders, and then cruiserweights. So the cruiserweights could never get higher to a main event or higher mid-carder. The mid-carders, like Jericho, Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, couldn't ever get to the main event, is because there was just a lot of politics in WCW. Hogan didn't want to drop his spot, no one did. And they just couldn't create new stars because of politic reasons. And the way Bischoff booked, he didn't really make mid-carders into main eventers and build new stars. And then they talked about having celebrities in 90. Well, at first they talked then about Goldberg in '97. He came in, was beating everyone in short matches, beat Hogan in the Georgia Dome, their biggest show of all time. Had like 40,000 people in the stadium. And then he had it for about 4 or 5 months, lost it to Nash, and then Nash and Hogan did the finger poke of doom. So basically, at first they were looking like they were going to face, but they was on the same team at the same time, and all Hogan did is poke Nash on the chest. Nash fell down, then Hogan pinned him 1, 2, 3 and got the belt off Nash. So yeah, this was towards the end of WCW '99. Then they were struggling creatively to build new stars. They were just sticking with the old timers. And then Eric Bischoff had a fallout with the leader in WCW, I can't remember his name. Ted Turner, I think. He went out for a few months. Then Vince Russo saw him and they thought, oh, this could help. Because he helped book the Attitude Era with Steve Austin, The Rock, and helped them get good ratings. But it was one of those bookers where he'd have a couple of good ideas, but most of them would be shit ideas what Vince would shut down. Whereas this one, you'd have one or two decent ideas, but the rest of it was shit. It was Crash TV, it was awful. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. Some of the creative was awful. They made an actor called David Arquette world champion. Yeah. Then it talked about the Bash at the Beach incident where Hogan lied down for Jarrett lied down for Hogan, and then Hogan walked out and Bischoff, they both left WCW. Hogan never was in WCW again after that. And then it was just more shit TV what Russo was booking. Then unfortunately in March 2001, AOL, it wouldn't have mattered even if they had high ratings. But when a company who owns you don't want you on their TV station, it's not going to last long. They didn't want wrestling on their TV station. They're not wrestling fans, and they took it off the TV station. Eric Bischoff did try and buy WCW, and then with an organisation he was working with, but the deal pulled out the last minute. And then WWE, Vince McMahon bought WCW. They had their final show, final night show in some arena. It was a nice looking arena, I can't remember what it was called. And so they had matches like Flair vs Sting and Steiner vs Booker T for the world title. That was the last ever WCW show. And then WWE owned it all and still do. So that's the rise and fall of WCW. Sad. But at least now there's competition now with AEW. I'm so glad AEW is here. It's great for the wrestling business. But it was an interesting documentary. Sad because it's a shame. But if they had a good TV deal where the TV station wanted them and they had a decent booker to book this good show, the roster, because they had a great roster, a really good roster, then WCW would still be here. But because AOL didn't want them on their channel, they threw them off. WCW was going to have their last show anyway. Then WWE, the evil empire, bought WCW. But it was an interesting documentary. I'll put it in the description. What would I rate it out of 10? I'd give it a 7. It was pretty good. I'll put it in the description and you guys can watch it. So thanks for watching. And I'll I've nearly gone for 20 minutes. But thanks for watching. And I'm going to do one more documentary now. That's a football documentary, Hillsborough Disaster. So that should be interesting. It won't go as long as this. I just had a lot to talk about in this documentary. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Go watch it if you want. It's a very interesting documentary. And bye for now, guys.